Today, I'm breaking down how I color graded King Paluta's Ewor Me, featuring Kwabena Kwabena, from the raw footage to the final look you saw on screen. But before we jump into the process, let's quickly talk about what color grading really is, because I can tell that most people misconstrue what it actually stands for. Color grading is not just about making footage look nice or cinematic. It is about mood, it is about style, and it's also about emotion and feeling. It's a stage where the visual tone of a story is shaped, where you decide how the audience should feel when they watch a scene. And that's why it matters so much. The same footage can feel warm, dramatic, nostalgic, or intense, just based on how it's graded. Now, a lot of people assume the software you use is what determines whether your work looks professional or not. But that is simply not true. I have DaVinci Resolve, and I must confess, it's an incredible industry standard tool. But for this project, I graded inside Premiere Pro. Why? Because it speeds up my workflow. And over the years, I've developed a personal grading style within Premiere for both indoor and outdoor footages. I've refined that process so much that I created my own LUT from it, a look that I understand deeply, including how it responds to footage shot under different lighting conditions, environments, and exposures. So when I apply it, I'm not guessing. I know exactly what it's going to do and how to adjust from there. And that's the key thing I want you to understand. Color grading is personal. It's shaped by your taste, your experience, your storytelling, and sometimes even the circumstances you're working under. The software doesn't make the image professional. The creative does. Your eye, your decisions, and your understanding of mood are what bring the final look to life. So in this breakdown, I'll walk you through how I approach grading this music video, the thinking behind the look, and how I use my personal LUT and workflow to shape the final visuals. So yeah, we are here in Premiere Pro, and let's look at some few footages that I'll quickly go over. I don't want this to be a very lengthy video, and so what I'm going to do is I'll take you through quickly the timeline of the music video. All right, so this is basically how I built my layers of the footage. Basically, that is it. And you realize that I have an adjustment layer over here, and this is just to create that, anamorphic feel by squeezing the frame. And also this is the adjustment layer for the LUTs that I'll be sharing. All right, it's actually down there in the description below, but I would really admonish you to follow through and understand how I actually used it, instead of just downloading it and probably not understanding how to apply it correctly. Okay, so that's basically the layer, the adjustment layer. You realize I have two adjustment layers where I actually have each assigned to one thing. I don't have to apply everything over there, because I could have equally applied the crop over here right on top of it. Okay, just on the same adjustment layer, but I decided not to. And the color grade, the LUT itself is actually in here, all right, in this particular adjustment layer. Then within the footage is where I make my adjustments. So you can see over here the curves. You notice that I have a lot of things actually going on in there, but normally I would start with the basic color correction, where I adjust my exposure, contrast, highlights if they need be. All right, so let's say for instance shadows and all that, I always make those adjustments. And when I apply the LUT initially, it will look like this. All right, for this footage and under that particular condition, it looked just like this, after which I had to make certain adjustments which resulted into this. So this is quickly a run through about how the application of the LUT and the importance of the adjustments, most importantly the adjustments, made the difference. Okay, so let's quickly go through the actual footages that I want to walk through so that you can clearly understand the application. So just as I said, there's always going to be an adjustment layer over here. All right, so this one is for the crop, and this is for the LUT that I'm going to share. I have a lot of videos explaining exactly how I apply the LUTs into the adjustment layer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to deactivate, or actually delete, the effect from the footages, and I'll quickly grade it from scratch quickly. All right, it might not particularly look identical because I want to quickly run through so that you understand, and depending on what footage you use, you can use your personal intuition or your own volition to, work on your footages with this very same LUT. All right, so let's start with this particular footage. So here you see that there's nothing happening over here. I only applied the LUT and origin to, low light, and nothing over here has been changed. You realize that everything is as it is. Okay, and so I'll quickly start with the basic correction, which is the color correction, because already the grade is here and I don't apply nothing over here on this adjustment layer. All right, so I'm going to make those changes in here on the footage itself. You can equally open a new adjustment layer to make those changes, but I decided to go with this because normally that's what I do and it works just fine. All right, so I'm working on the footage itself. Good. So first of all, look at the shot and notice that it looks dark. So I'm going to open up the highlights, the whites in there, and if I need some contrast, I bring it back because I'm a sucker for contrast a whole lot. I saw that down there in the comment section for the previous video where I explained how I shot the music video. Someone was talking about the fact that I love contrast too much, and it's a personal style. That's personally what I go with. All right, so if I need to push some tint in there, initially realized that there were too much of the browns in there, so I had to shift my temperature towards the left to apply more blues in there so that I could separate my subject. You realize that the background has its own color from the light that's coming from behind. All right, so there's actually a light coming from behind through the windows, hitting against the white surface, which is flooding the entire room. Basically that. And I had another light coming from camera left, hitting my subject to, carve him out of the background, to give him a different tone, because I normally use a daylight temperature, which is 5600 Kelvin, all right, which gives me, somewhat a neutral look for my subject. So I'll push in some blacks in there a little bit. Maybe the contrast get a little bit too wild. Open up with the shadows. Then if I need to intensify the blues in the background, I quickly would normally go in here into the curves and selectively with the eyedropper tool, hit in there, it selects the color sampling for me. And I'll just push it up and increase the saturation. Basically like so. So that's basically what I do. And if I want to also touch on the skin tone, just hit on that color information and it just samples it, and I can reduce or increase the saturation or the vibrance over there. All right, basically like so. So that's basically what I do. Of course, it wouldn't look identical to this because they have different sampling, different effects applied over here. So yeah, moving on to the next quickly. What I normally do is, if the shots look identical in terms of color and everything, lighting, contrast and all that, I'll first of all select the effects that I did in the previous footage. So I'm going to click on it and hit Control C to copy. Then I'll move on over here to the next footage and apply. Of course, shot under different conditions, different light positions wouldn't make it look identical. So what I'll do is, readily what I see is, I love the blues in there. It looks quite good, just that there's too much of the highlights. So of course I'm going to reduce the highlights and the whites a little bit to make sure that it looks normal and I'm not losing any information in here because I correctly exposed the shot. So it's very important. It always starts from what you do with your camera to end up with something that you can work with. So let's say I need to perhaps add a little bit more magenta into the skin. I'm going to hit the hue versus hue eyedropper, select a sample, and I can just play with the curves like so. Maybe here a little bit. It's affecting the lamp in the background, which I can make a little bit, you know, towards the magentas, right? And it actually affects the skin a little bit. And I feel like the skin looks way too saturated. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reduce the saturation in there. And always remember that color information over here exists somewhere in the shot, which is the lamp hitting the curtain over there. So be very wary of how much you pull. And yeah, of course, DaVinci Resolve would have given you more width to work with, where you can select. Premiere Pro allows that, but you wouldn't have more access to that. And yeah, this is just fine. I can just work with this. I can probably push in some blacks in there. I can actually push some blacks in there, push it this way. And yeah, maybe with the color wheels to be more, you know, creative, I can push in some blues into the shadows in there. Then I'll go back to the curves and increase the browns in there. Perfect. So that I have the blues in the shadows and I can still maintain my warm skin tone. Good. So definitely look different. This time around I gave it a little bit more, you know, exposure, but yeah, still looks good. Basically, that's how it goes. And this is an outdoor shot. I can quickly also notice that there's a lot of, you know, browns or warmth in there. So with the temperature, I'm going to push it all the way to the left. Then the deal here is to ensure that the greens look natural. That was the point. So you notice that the greens look very natural in here. The greens have a bit of, you know, some blues in the shadows. I don't know if you can really tell, but that's what we are trying to replicate here. So what I normally do is I would select with the hue versus hue to change the hue of the green. So I select a sample where I can use, then I'll just, you know, control the curves, push it down that way where I can get something close towards the end results in the music video you saw. Yes, so maybe I shift it this way, or probably towards the browns a little bit. Yeah, and you notice that it readily makes the skin even more warm, so we can easily, as I said before, reduce the saturation a little bit. Yes, then back to basic correction. I'm gonna push in the shadows, contrast, and the blacks in there like that, and reduce the temperature just like so. So if not exactly so, we were able to get close. Okay, what I noticed is the skin tone has a bit more magenta, so let's just apply that just to ensure that we are quite close. So yeah, the hue versus hue, select the skin tone, then I'll just push upward a little bit towards the side, a little bit over here as well, not too much, otherwise it makes the skin tone looks unrealistic. And I think we are close. I would say we are very close to that. Beautiful, just like so. Then the last, of course, let's see, under the lighting conditions, you notice that this is quite close, the contrast and everything. So we're going to easily copy the details in here in this effect and apply it right on this. Of course, the exposure is very different, very dark. So what I'm going to do is make sure that I bring in some lights in there. Of course, the exposure, push it this way for the basic correction. What I'm doing is I'm color correcting. All right, so you see me pull a lot of things. These are actually muscle memory, because normally I would use Premiere Pro to color grade, and so I can easily identify what I need to do and go straight to it. So with the color wheels, I'm going to push down towards the blues this way to change the overall shadow information, or should I say features. Just open it up this way. Let's look at how different they are. Okay, so the background actually has a lot of blues in there, and this time around we have greens instead. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to push the tint towards the magenta a little bit. Then I'm going to go down there to the curves. Okay, select the eyedropper, hit on that area, or probably sample the blues because it didn't necessarily pick it up for me. I'm going to change it slightly, probably towards the side a little bit. Okay, then I'm going to assign the temperature to the left a little bit more. Now we have something close. It has a bit more magenta in there, so let's just add that a little bit and go in here to the curves once more. Change the hue of the skin tone a little bit to a natural, hue. Yeah, basically. So we might not be perfectly right there on point, but I can say that we are actually close. All right, and that's basically how I use Premiere Pro to easily and quickly color grade. So yeah, it's actually a matter of personal choice, whatever it is you want to do. DaVinci, of course, gives you a plethora of width, a huge spectrum of possibilities that you can actually explore. However, Premiere Pro, I've been able to create my own LUT, which I've actually shared down there in the description below, so you can download it and follow suit and use it on your footages as well. So yeah, basically that's it. That's how I color grade with Premiere Pro. That's the reason why I still color grade with Premiere Pro, because it speeds up my process, my workflow, and yeah, the results are always outstanding and beautiful. Thank you very much for the comments. Also share down there in the comment section below what you make of this particular video. If you loved it, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, turn on the post notification button, and I'm gonna catch you next time in the next video. Have a wonderful day. See ya.